The ship was dying. Captain Lee Ji-won could feel it in the way the hull groaned and twisted around them. The metal walls that had protected 37 human souls for 6 months now leaked coolant and sparked with failing electrical systems. Through the cracked viewport, he could see their destination growing larger. Kythera Prime looked like a bruised fruit against the black of space. Purple and green clouds swirled across its surface in patterns that hurt to look at. "Captain, we have maybe one landing attempt left in us," said Park Do-hyun from the engineering station. His hands moved quickly over damaged controls. "The engines are holding together with hope and spare wire." Ji-won nodded. He had known this moment would come since they escaped the destruction of New Seoul Colony. Their transport ship was never meant for long journeys. It was built to carry supplies between planets, not to house refugees fleeing from a war they could not win. "What do the scans tell us about the surface?" he asked. Han Yuna looked up from her science station. Her face was pale but determined. "The atmospheric composition is breathable for humans, but barely. High acid content in the air. The ground temperature varies wildly. And Captain, the previous survey reports from other species mark this planet as unsurvivable." "Unsurvivable for who?" Ji-won asked. "Everyone who has tried. The Thuran Empire attempted colonization 3 times. Each attempt failed within weeks. The reports mention aggressive native life forms, unstable geology, and environmental conditions that kill most known species." Ji-won looked around the bridge at his small crew. These people had trusted him to lead them away from their dying colony. They had followed him across space to this unknown world because there was nowhere else to go. The fuel was almost gone. The life support systems were failing. They had enough food for maybe 2 more weeks. "Tell me about the life forms," he said. Yuna pulled up data on her screen. Crystalline entities that hunt in groups. "They seem to be made of living mineral compounds. The reports say they can slice through metal and are attracted to electromagnetic signatures. Most technology fails around them. And the geology? Unstable would be kind. The ground itself appears to be chemically active. Previous colonists reported that their equipment was dissolved by soil that seemed to actively consume organic and synthetic materials. The locals called it hungry ground." Ji-won smiled grimly. "Hungry ground and crystal monsters. Acid rain and unstable geology. Sounds almost like home." The other crew members stared at him. Dr. Kim Soo-young, who had joined them from the medical bay, raised an eyebrow. "Captain, Earth was never this hostile. Earth had ice ages that lasted thousands of years. Volcanoes that blocked out the sun for decades. Hurricanes that could level cities. Earthquakes that split continents. Our ancestors survived all of that without the technology we have now." He turned to address everyone on the bridge. "I know this looks impossible, but we are humans from Earth. Our planet tried to kill us for millions of years and we are still here. We learned to build homes in deserts and on frozen wastelands. We learned to grow food in places where nothing should live. We learned to find water in the driest places and to make fire in the wettest." Through the ship's communication system, he could hear the other survivors moving around in the passenger compartments, families trying to keep their children calm, engineers working to repair what could be repaired, everyone doing what they could to prepare for an uncertain future. "What are our alternatives?" asked Cho Min-soo, the agricultural specialist who had kept them fed during the journey. "There are none," Ji-won said simply. "We land on Kythera Prime or we die in space. Those are our choices." The ship shuddered as they entered the planet's atmosphere. Warning lights flashed across every control panel. The temperature outside rose rapidly as they descended through layers of thick, acidic clouds. Rain began hitting the hull with sounds like small hammers. "Beginning landing sequence," announced Do-hyun. "Everyone hold on." The descent was violent. The ship fought against winds that tried to flip them over. Lightning struck their hull twice, causing electrical systems to fail and restart. Through it all, Ji-won could see the surface of Kythera Prime growing closer. It looked like no world he had ever seen. The ground was covered in formations that seemed to shift and move even as he watched. Purple and green vegetation grew in twisted shapes, rivers of liquid that might have been water or might have been acid-carved channels through a landscape that looked more like abstract art than natural. Terrain. Landing site identified, called out Jang Hyeji from the communication station. Relatively flat area about 2 kilometers from what appears to be a water source. "Define relatively flat," said Ji-won. "The slope is only about 15 degrees, and there are fewer of the moving ground. Formations. The final approach was controlled chaos. The ship's landing systems worked just long enough to slow their descent before failing completely. They hit the ground hard enough to throw everyone against their safety restraints. Metal groaned and twisted. Something exploded in the engine compartment, filling the air with the smell of burned circuits. Then there was silence. G1 unbuckled himself and stood up slowly. Around him, his crew was doing the same. Everyone seemed to be unhurt, though they would all have bruises tomorrow. Status report, he said. Engines are completely dead, reported Do-hyun. But we do not need them anymore. Life support is functioning on backup power, added Dr. Kim. We have maybe 6 hours of air recycling left. Communications are working, said Hiji. I am picking up signals from automated monitoring stations throughout the system. Different alien species are watching us. Watching us do what? Asked Yuna. Fail, probably, said Ji-won. Let them watch. He moved to the main viewport and looked out at their new world. The acid rain continued to fall, leaving streaks on the reinforced glass. In the distance, he could see formations that might have been plants or might have been something else entirely. The sky was an unsettling shade of green. All right, everyone, he said, turning back to his crew. We have work to do. Yuna, I want you to start analyzing the local atmosphere and soil samples as soon as we get outside. Do-hyun, assess what materials we can salvage from the ship. Dr. Kim, check on everyone's health and prepare for environmental exposure. Minsu, start thinking about how we might grow food in these conditions. Hyeji, keep monitoring those alien signals. I want to know if anyone decides to do more than just watch. What about shelter? Asked Dr. Kim. Ji-won looked out at the hostile landscape again. Somewhere out there in the acid rain and shifting ground, 37 humans would have to make a new home. The aliens watching from their safe monitoring stations probably expected them to be dead within days. We will build it, he said. We are humans from Earth. Building homes in impossible places is what we do. Outside, Kythera Prime waited to test that claim. 3 weeks had passed since the crash landing on Kythera Prime. Most species would have focused on rationing food and finding caves to hide in. Instead, Lee Ji-won spent his mornings walking directly into the acid storms that swept across the landscape every few hours. The patterns are consistent, he told Han Yuna as they crouched under a makeshift shelter. Rain that could burn through metal fell around them like liquid fire. The storms moved from the eastern mountains in cycles. 43 minutes of heavy acid rain, then 17 minutes of lighter precipitation, then 26 minutes of clear air. Yuna recorded his observations on a water-damaged tablet. The atmospheric pressure drops exactly 12 minutes before each storm cycle begins. We can predict them. Around them, the other 35 survivors worked to establish their temporary camp. They had salvaged what they could from the crashed transport ship and built shelters from metal panels and fabric. It was not much, but it kept them alive. Park Do-hyun emerged from under the largest shelter, carrying a container of soil samples. The hungry ground is not random either, he announced. It only consumes organic materials when the mineral content reaches specific levels. I tested it with different combinations. Show me, said Ji-won. Do-hyun spread soil samples on a metal plate. Normal dirt from Earth would be completely consumed by this stuff within hours. But if you add certain minerals in the right amounts, it becomes stable, safe to touch. He demonstrated by placing his bare hand on one soil sample. Nothing happened. Then he touched another sample and quickly pulled his hand away as the soil began to smoke and bubble. The key is understanding what the ground wants, he explained. It is not trying to hurt us. It is trying to balance its chemistry. We can work with that. Dr. Kim Soo-young joined them, wiping rain from her face. Speaking of understanding, I have been studying our physical responses to this environment. Something interesting is happening. Good interesting or bad interesting? Asked Ji-won. Good, I think. The high mineral content in the air and water is actually improving our bone density and muscle strength. The increased radiation from this sun is being absorbed by our skin in ways that seem beneficial. We are not just surviving here. We are adapting. From across the camp came a high-pitched sound that made everyone freeze. It was like crystal bells mixed with the screech of metal on stone. Through the acid rain, shapes began moving toward them. Tall, angular forms that reflected the green, lightning from the storm clouds above. Crystal hunters whispered, Yuna. Just like the reports described, the creatures moved with fluid grace despite their rigid appearance. They were beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Each one stood nearly 3 meters tall and seemed to be carved from living gemstone. As they approached, every piece of electronic equipment in the camp began to malfunction. "Do not run," said Jiwon quietly. "Running triggers predator responses in most species." The lead crystal hunter stopped just outside their camp. It tilted its head in a motion that seemed almost curious. Light passed through its body in complex patterns. The sound it made changed, becoming less harsh and more musical. Yuna slowly reached for her damaged communicator. "Captain, these things are electromagnetic. What if they are not trying to attack our electronics? What if they are trying to communicate?" She adjusted the frequency settings on her device. The static and interference changed to something that almost resembled the sounds the creatures were making. The crystal hunters immediately became more animated. Their internal lights pulsed in rhythm with the electronic signals. "They are responding," she whispered excitedly. Over the next hour, while acid rain continued to fall around them, Yuna established the first communication protocol with an alien species on Cathara Prime. The crystal hunters were not predators hunting for food. They were curious beings investigating the strange new electromagnetic signatures that had appeared in their territory. "They want to know why we are not afraid of the rain," Yuna translated after exchanging several signal patterns. "Most creatures hide when the storms come. Tell them we come from a world where the rain was sometimes worse," said Jiwon. The response from the crystal hunters was a harmonic sound that seemed to express surprise or admiration. They began moving around the camp, not threatening but exploring. One of them approached young Nam Suho, who had been watching from behind his mother. The boy, only 8 years old, did something that made all the adults hold their breath. He walked directly up to the crystal creature and placed his small hand against its surface. Instead of being harmed, he laughed with delight as lights danced through the creature's body in response to his touch. "They like us," Suho announced to everyone. "They think we are interesting." The crystal hunters remained near the camp for the rest of the day. They seemed fascinated by how the humans worked during the storms instead of hiding from them. When Cho Min-soo began setting up his first experimental growing plots using Do-hyun's mineral-balanced soil, the creatures watched with what appeared to be genuine interest. "I think we have made our first allies on this planet," said Jang Hyeji, who had been monitoring communications from the alien observation stations throughout the system. "The signals from the monitoring posts have changed. They are no longer just watching us. They are studying us intensively." "What kind of signals?" asked Yuan. "Data streams. Massive amounts of information being transmitted to various alien governments. Analysis reports. Some of it is in languages I can partially decode. They are calling our survival here impossible. They are debating whether humans are actually a previously unknown type of synthetic organism designed for extreme environments." Dr. Kim laughed. "Synthetic organisms. They think we are machines because biological life should not be able to function here." That evening, as the storm cycle entered its clear phase, Jiwon stood at the edge of their camp looking out over the alien landscape. The crystal hunters had taken positions around their settlement, not as guards exactly, but as curious neighbors keeping watch over the strange visitors. Behind him, his people worked on projects that would have seemed impossible 3 weeks ago. Do-hyun was designing permanent structures that would channel stormwater into useful systems. Min-soo was planning agricultural plots that would use the planet's unique chemistry to grow food. Dr. Kim was treating minor injuries and documenting the positive physical changes everyone was experiencing. "Captain," called Yuna from her research station, "I am getting more complex communications from our crystal friends. I think they want to show us something." The lead crystal hunter approached and began making intricate light patterns while producing harmonious sounds. Through trial and error, Yuna determined that it was giving them directions to a location deeper in the territory. "They want to take us somewhere," she translated. "Somewhere they think will be useful for what we are trying to do." Jiwon made a decision that would have seemed insane to the alien observers monitoring them. "Tomorrow we follow them. If we are going to make this world our home, we need to understand it completely." High above in the orbital monitoring stations, alien scientists recorded this decision with growing amazement. The humans from the Deathworld were not just surviving impossible conditions. They were forming alliances with creatures that had killed previous colonization attempts. The Watchers began to understand that they were observing something unprecedented in galactic history. The crystal hunters led them to a valley that defied every rule of planetary geology that Han Yuna had ever learned. The ground here formed natural terraces, as if the planet itself had decided to create building sites. Streams of clean water flowed in precise channels between areas of stable, mineral-rich soil. Most remarkable of all, the acid storms that swept over the valley seemed to lose their destructive power, becoming something closer to heavy rain. "How is this possible?" asked Park Do-yun, kneeling to test the soil composition. "The chemistry here is completely different from the areas we passed through." The largest crystal hunter made a series of harmonic sounds that Yuna had learned to recognize as explanatory communication. She worked with her modified translator for several minutes before looking up with excitement. "They call this a healing place," she announced. "The planet makes these areas to balance the chemistry of the more volatile regions. The crystal hunters have been guarding this valley for generations, waiting for someone who could use it properly." Li Jiwan walked to the center of the valley and looked around. It was as if Cathera Prime had prepared a perfect location for a human settlement. The natural terraces could support buildings. The water was clean and abundant. The soil, while still alien, was stable and rich with minerals that could support plant growth. "They brought us here because they think we can make something permanent," he said. "Something that will work with the planet instead of fighting against it." Dr. Kim Soo-young was examining the water from one of the streams. "Captain, this water has mineral content that would be toxic to most species, but it is actually beneficial for human physiology. It is like the planet is providing exactly what we need." Cho Min-soo was already envisioning agricultural possibilities. "I can work with this soil. The mineral balance is different from Earth, but I understand the principles. We could grow food here. Real crops, not just survival rations." Over the following weeks, the humans began construction of their first permanent settlement. They called it New Busan, after a coastal city on Earth known for its resilience. In the face of natural disasters, Do-hyun's engineering background proved invaluable as he designed buildings that worked with Cathera Prime's hostile environment instead of simply trying to survive it. The structures he planned would collect acid rain and filtration systems that converted it to clean water and usable chemicals. Storm winds would be channeled to generate power. The foundations would extend deep into the mineral-rich ground, creating stability, while allowing the buildings to flex with seismic activity. "We are not building on this planet," he explained to the others as they worked on the first foundation. "We are building with it." The construction process amazed the alien observers monitoring them from space. Traditional galactic engineering focused on creating sealed environments that excluded hostile planetary conditions. The humans were doing the opposite. They were designing their settlement to incorporate and benefit from the very forces that had destroyed previous colonization attempts. When the first major storm hit during construction, the partially completed buildings demonstrated Do-hyun's innovative approach. Instead of being damaged by the acid rain, the structures channeled it into collection systems. Instead of being blown apart by the winds, they generated electrical power. The crystal hunters watched from nearby hills, their internal lights pulsing in, patterns that Yuna had learned to recognize as approval. Jang Hyeji had established a communication hub that monitored the increasingly frantic transmissions between alien observation posts throughout the system. The conversations she intercepted revealed growing concern and confusion among the watchers they are calling emergency scientific conferences, she reported to Ji-won during one of their evening planning sessions. "Multiple species are sending research teams to study what we are doing here. The Theran Empire has dispatched a survey ship to confirm that we are actually succeeding on a planet they could not colonize. Let them come," said Ji-won. "Maybe they will learn something useful." The agricultural systems that Min-soo developed represented another breakthrough that challenged galactic understanding of planetary colonization. Instead of trying to create Earth-like growing conditions, he adapted Earth crops to thrive in Cathera Prime's unique environment. His first successful harvest came from modified rice that had been genetically adjusted to process the high mineral content in the local water. The plants grew faster and stronger than they ever had on Earth, producing grain with enhanced nutritional value. Root vegetables planted in the balanced soil developed complex flavors and dense nutrient profiles that surpassed anything grown in standard galactic agricultural systems. "The secret is not fighting the planet," Min-soo explained to Dr. Kim as they examined the first successful crop yield. The secret is understanding what the planet offers and adapting to work with those gifts. By the third month after arriving in the valley, New Busan had grown into something that should not have existed according to every model of planetary habitability used by galactic civilization. The settlement featured permanent buildings that generated their own power, clean water, and resources from environmental conditions that had killed previous colonists within days. The crystal hunters had become integrated into the community structure, serving as early warning systems for changes in weather patterns and geological activity. Young Nam Suho had learned to communicate with them directly, translating their harmonic language better than sophisticated electronic systems. "They want to know if more humans will come," Suho reported, after spending an afternoon with the crystal beings. "They like having neighbors who are not afraid of the planet." The settlement's success began attracting attention from unexpected sources. Hiji detected incoming signals from human survivors of other failed colonies throughout the sector. Somehow, word was spreading that humans had achieved the impossible on Kythera Prime. "We are getting requests for refuge," she told the settlement council during one of their weekly meetings. "Small groups of humans from different parts of the galaxy want to join us here." "How many?" asked Ji-won. "So far 17 confirmed groups. Maybe 60 additional people total." Dr. Kim raised practical concerns. "Can we support that many people?" "Our resources are still limited," Do-hyun smiled confidently. "Our resources are not limited. They are just different from what we expected. This planet provides everything we need if we work with it correctly. More people means more hands to build, more minds to solve problems, and more opportunities to develop our understanding of how to live here." The decision to welcome additional human refugees marked a turning point in the development of New Busan. The settlement began expanding beyond survival to something approaching prosperity. The alien observers watched in silent amazement as the humans not only survived but began to thrive on a world that had defeated some of the most technologically advanced civilizations in the galaxy. As Ji-won stood in the center of the growing settlement during a mild acid storm, watching his people work and laugh and build their new lives, he realized that they had accomplished something unprecedented. They had not conquered Kythera Prime. They had joined it. Above them, in monitoring stations throughout the system, alien scientists struggled to understand how creatures from a Deathworld had succeeded, where others had failed. The answer was simple, though it would take them much longer to comprehend it. Humans did not see Kythera Prime as hostile. They saw it as home. 6 months after the crash landing, New Busan had become something that challenged every scientific principle known to galactic civilization. The settlement now housed 112 humans from 17 different failed colonies throughout the sector. What had started as a desperate survival camp had transformed into a thriving community that seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. Dr. Kim Soo-young stood in her new medical facility, examining test results that should not have been possible. The building around her was constructed from materials that had been considered too dangerous for most species to handle. The walls incorporated crystalline formations that filtered air naturally while generating soft, healing light. The floors were made from processed hungry ground that had been transformed into a surface harder than steel, but warm to the touch. Lee Ji-won, "You need to see these health reports," she called to the settlement's leader as he passed by her window. Ji-won entered the medical center and looked over the data displays. "What am I looking at?" "Physical improvements in every human who has lived here for more than 3 months. Bone density increased by an average of 15%. Muscle mass and cardiovascular efficiency up across all age groups. Mental acuity tests show enhanced cognitive function. Most remarkably, we are seeing reversal of genetic damage from radiation exposure and improved resistance to diseases that were common in the other colonies." She pulled up comparative scans on her main display. "Look at these cellular analyses. The human body is not just adapting to Kythera Prime. It is being optimized by the environment. The minerals in the air and water, the unique radiation from the sun, even the atmospheric pressure are all contributing to improved human health." Ji-won studied the data with fascination. "We are becoming stronger. More than that, we are becoming a version of humanity that is better suited for life in space. The adaptations we are developing here could benefit human colonies throughout the galaxy." Outside the medical center, the sounds of construction and daily life filled the air. Park Do-hyun had expanded his building techniques to create structures that were architectural marvels by any galactic standard. The newest residential buildings grew organically from the ground, their walls incorporating living crystal formations that provided light, heat, and communication networks. Streets were carved into patterns that channeled stormwater into underground systems that powered the entire settlement. Hanyuna had established a research laboratory that studied the complex ecosystem of Kythera Prime in partnership with the Crystal Hunters. Her discoveries were revolutionizing understanding of symbiotic relationships between intelligent species and planetary environments. The crystal beings were not just native life forms. They were active participants in maintaining the planet's chemical and geological balance. They have been gardening this world for thousands of years, she explained to a group of newly arrived refugees during their orientation. The healing valleys, the mineral distribution, even the storm patterns are partially guided by crystal hunter activities. They have been preparing Kythera Prime for a species that could work with them to maintain the planet's health. One of the newcomers, a woman named Lee Ki-won, who had escaped from a failing orbital station, asked the obvious question. Why humans? What makes us different from the other species that tried to colonize here? Yuna smiled. We come from a planet that taught us to see hostile environments as challenges to overcome, rather than threats to flee from. Every other species in this galaxy evolved on worlds that were naturally suitable for their biology. Earth forced humanity to become adaptable. The truth of this statement was demonstrated daily in the settlement. Human children played outside during acid storms, wearing simple protective gear and laughing as they splashed through puddles that would dissolve most alien technologies. Teenagers like Nam Suho, now 9 and completely adapted to Kythera Prime, could communicate with crystal hunters more effectively than sophisticated translation systems. Chominsu's agricultural programs had expanded beyond simple food production to create the most productive farming systems ever documented on a hostile world. His crops not only grew in conditions that would kill plants from other worlds, they produced yields that exceeded Earth-normal agriculture by significant margins. The secret is diversity, he explained to the newest agricultural specialist, a man named Oh Jae-min, who had joined from a failed mining colony. We do not try to grow Earth crops in Earth conditions. We grow adapted Earth crops in Kythera Prime conditions. The plants become stronger. The food becomes more nutritious. Everyone benefits. Jae-min examined the thriving fields with amazement. These vegetables have mineral content that would be considered toxic on most worlds. Toxic to other species, corrected Minsu. For humans, these minerals provide enhanced nutrition and improved physical performance. We are learning that what kills others makes us stronger. This philosophy extended to every aspect of life in New Busan. The settlement's power systems used the planet's violent weather as an energy source. The water treatment facilities processed acid rain into the cleanest drinking water in the sector. Even the waste management systems worked with local chemistry to break down organic materials in ways that enriched the soil. Jang Hyeji had expanded her communication systems to establish regular contact with alien monitoring stations throughout the system. The conversations she facilitated had evolved from scientific observation to something approaching diplomatic recognition. The Velthrak Consortium wants to send a research team to study our settlement, she reported during a community meeting. They are offering to provide advanced technology in exchange for permission to document our methods. The Settlement Council considered this request carefully. They had received similar offers from dozens of alien species, all wanting to understand how humans had succeeded where others had failed. What do they want to study specifically? Asked Ji-won. Our construction techniques, our agricultural systems, our symbiotic relationship with the crystal hunters. Most of all, they want to understand human physiology and how we adapt to environments that kill other species. Dr. Kim raised concerns about alien medical research on human subjects. We need to be careful about what information we share. Some species might want to study us in ways that could be harmful. Agreed, said Ji-won. But we also need to consider the bigger picture. If we can teach other species how to live on hostile worlds, we could help solve colonization problems throughout the galaxy. The debate that followed reflected the growing confidence of the New Busan community. They were no longer refugees struggling to survive. They had become pioneers of a new approach to planetary colonization. that could benefit all of galactic civilization. Young Lee Ki-wan, now 16 and serving as a liaison between the human settlement and the crystal hunter communities, offered a perspective that surprised the adults. Maybe we should ask the crystal hunters what they think. This is their planet too. The suggestion led to the first formal diplomatic meeting between humans, crystal hunters, and alien observers from the monitoring stations. The crystal beings, speaking through Ki-wan's translation, made their position clear. They welcomed the humans as permanent residents of Kithara Prime and were willing to share their knowledge with other species that approached the planet with respect rather than conquest. The meeting concluded with an agreement that would change the future of the Kithara system. New Busan would serve as a research center and diplomatic hub for studying sustainable colonization techniques. The crystal hunters would share their knowledge of planetary management with interested species. The human settlement would continue to grow and develop, while serving as an example of successful symbiotic colonization. As the alien research ships began arriving in the system, Ji-won stood on the observation platform of New Busan's central tower and looked out over their achievement. The settlement now featured permanent buildings that seemed to grow from the planet itself. Gardens flourished in soil that had once consumed everything organic. Clean streams flowed where acid rain had once carved channels of destruction. Most remarkable of all, the people were thriving. Human refugees who had arrived sick and traumatized from failed colonies were becoming healthy and confident. Children born on Kithara Prime were growing up stronger and more capable than their parents. The entire community was evolving into something new and better. "We did not just survive here," he said to Dr. Kim as she joined him on the platform. "We found out what humans can become when we work with a world instead of trying to conquer it." Above them, alien ships approached to study the impossible settlement that had transformed their understanding of life in the universe. The crystal hunters began singing 2 days before the great storm arrived. Their harmonic voices created melodies that resonated through the ground and made the air itself vibrate with warning. Han Yuna had learned to recognize many of their communication patterns, but this song was different. It carried urgency and something that felt almost like excitement. "They are not afraid," she reported to Lee Ji-won. As they stood in the central command center of New Busan, "They are anticipating something." Through the reinforced windows, the settlement looked peaceful in the afternoon light. 237 humans now called Kithara Prime home. The most recent arrivals included families with young children who had never known life on a stable world. For them, New Busan represented safety and prosperity beyond anything they had experienced. Park Do-hyun entered the command center carrying atmospheric readings that made everyone pause. "The pressure drop is unlike anything we have recorded. The storm formation patterns are showing energy levels that exceed our measurement capabilities." "How much time do we have?" asked Ji-won. "Maybe 18 hours until it reaches us." "Captain, the previous colony reports described the Great Storm as a planetary phenomenon that occurs every few years. It has never been survived by off-world settlers." Dr. Kim Soo-young joined them with medical supplies and emergency equipment. "I have prepared the medical center for casualties and emergency care." "But Lee Ji-won, if this storm is as destructive as the reports suggest, our preparations might not be enough." The alien monitoring stations had been transmitting increasingly urgent communications throughout the system. Jang Hyeji had intercepted evacuation offers from 3 different species, all urging the humans to abandon their settlement and accept relocation to safer worlds. "The Thuran Empire is offering immediate transport off-planet for all human civilians," she reported. "The Veltrak Consortium has positioned rescue ships just outside the storm's projected path. They all expect us to evacuate." Ji-won looked around the command center at his key advisors. These people had trusted him to lead them through 6 months of impossible challenges. They had built something remarkable on a world that should have killed them. Now they faced the ultimate test of their symbiotic relationship with Kithara Prime. "What do the Crystal Hunters recommend?" he asked. Young Nam Suho, now 9 years old and completely fluent in Crystal Hunter harmonic language, spoke up from his position near the communication equipment. "They say the Great Storm is not something to survive. It is something to use. They want us to prepare for harvest, not destruction." "Harvest what?" asked Do-hyun. Suho listened to another series of harmonic communications before answering. "Energy, water, minerals, everything we need for the next year. They say the Great Storm brings gifts to those who know how to receive them. Over the next 18 hours, New Busan transformed from a peaceful settlement into a complex machine designed to capture and process the most violent weather phenomenon on the planet. Do-hyun's construction teams worked frantically to deploy additional energy collection systems throughout the settlement. Cho Min-soo prepared his agricultural areas to receive massive amounts of mineral-rich water and nutrients. The crystal hunters positioned themselves at strategic locations around the settlement, their bodies beginning to resonate with harmonic frequencies that seemed to strengthen the human-built structures. Their song became a continuous vibration that all the humans could feel in their bones. As the first winds of the Great Storm reached New Busan, the alien observers throughout the system watched in fascination and horror. The humans were not taking shelter. They were opening their settlement to receive the full force of planetary violence that had destroyed every previous colonization attempt. The storm hit like a living force of pure destruction. Winds that could shred metal structures howled across the landscape. Acid rain fell in torrents that would dissolve most known materials. Lightning struck continuously, turning the sky into a constant display of electrical fury. The ground itself began to move and shift as geological forces stirred by the storm changed the fundamental structure of the landscape. But New Busan did not break under the assault. Instead, it began to sing. Do-hyun's buildings flexed and swayed with the winds while their integrated collection systems channeled the storm's energy into massive storage units. The acid rain, instead of destroying the settlement, flowed through filtration networks that converted it into clean water and useful chemicals. The lightning strikes, rather than causing damage, were absorbed by crystal formations that stored electrical energy for months of future use. Most remarkably, the humans themselves seemed to thrive during the storm. Dr. Kim monitored the settlement's population and discovered that the extreme conditions actually improved human health and performance. The high-energy environment stimulated biological processes that enhanced physical and mental capabilities. "We are not just surviving this," she reported to Ji-won as they watched the storm rage around their command center. "We are being optimized by it." The crystal hunters had positioned themselves throughout the settlement in patterns that created resonance networks. Their harmonic singing guided and controlled the storm's energy, directing the most useful aspects toward human collection systems while dispersing the most dangerous forces harmlessly into the ground. Lee Ki-won, now 17 and serving as the primary human liaison with the crystal hunter community, translated their communications during the height of the storm. They say this is why they have been waiting, for a species that could dance with the storm instead of hiding from it. The most dramatic moment came when an alien research station, monitoring the storm from what they thought was a safe distance, lost power and began falling toward the planet's surface. The station contained 12 researchers from the Veltrak Consortium who had been studying human colonization techniques. Without hesitation, Kaiwan organized a rescue mission during the worst part of the Great Storm. Using vehicles designed to operate in Cathera Prime's extreme conditions and guided by crystal hunters who could navigate the chaotic landscape, the humans reached the crash station and evacuated all 12 alien researchers. The rescue operation was broadcast throughout the Galactic Monitoring Network, showing human beings performing acts of heroism in environmental conditions that would kill most known species. The aliens who had come to study human survival found themselves being saved by the very beings they had considered primitive. "Why did you risk your lives for us?" asked the lead Veltrak researcher, after being brought to safety in New Busan's medical center. Dr. Kim, while treating minor injuries from the crash, answered simply, "Because you needed help. That is what people do." The Great Storm lasted for 3 days. When it finally passed, New Busan emerged not just intact but dramatically improved. The energy collected during the storm provided power for months of future operations. The mineral-rich water filled every storage facility and enhanced the soil chemistry throughout their agricultural systems. Most importantly, the settlement had expanded during the storm, with new buildings and infrastructure that had been constructed in partnership with geological forces unleashed by the weather. The alien researchers who had been rescued remained in New Busan for several weeks, documenting the aftermath of the Great Storm and trying to understand how humans had not just survived but prospered during a planetary event that defeated advanced technological civilizations. "Your Species does not follow any known patterns for survival behavior, the Velthrak team leader observed during one of many interviews. You seek out challenges that others avoid. You build relationships with environmental forces that others consider hostile. You create prosperity from conditions that cause other species to flee. Ji-won, standing on the expanded observation platform of New Busan's central tower, looked out over their transformed settlement. The Great Storm had revealed the true potential of human Kythera Prime symbiosis. What the aliens saw as impossible survival, the humans experienced as coming home. We do not see this world as hostile, he explained to the alien researchers. We see it as a partner. The storm was not trying to destroy us. It was offering us resources and energy. We just had to learn how to accept the gifts. As ships from dozens of alien species began arriving to study the aftermath of the Great Storm, the humans of New Busan prepared for a new phase of their development. They had proven that their approach to planetary colonization was not just viable, but superior to traditional methods. The universe was watching, and the watchers were finally beginning to understand. 1 year after the crash landing that should have killed them all, New Busan had become the most studied settlement in galactic history. 312 humans now lived on Kythera Prime, and their success had forced every major civilization to reconsider fundamental assumptions about planetary colonization, species adaptation, and the nature of life itself. Lee Ji-won stood in the diplomatic center that had been constructed after the Great Storm, welcoming the largest alien delegation ever assembled to study a human settlement. Representatives from 47 different species had traveled from across the galaxy to witness something that their scientists insisted should not exist. Governor Ji-won, said Ambassador Velthar of the Galactic Council, using the title that had been formally recognized 3 months earlier. The Council has reviewed your settlement's achievements and reached a conclusion that we never expected to announce. We would like to invite humanity to join the Galactic Council as a full member species. The offer represented the highest honor that galactic civilization could extend to any species. It meant recognition as equals among civilizations that had existed for thousands of years longer than human space travel. What changed your minds? Asked Ji-won. The ambassador, a tall being with crystalline skin that reminded Ji-won of the native crystal hunters, gestured toward the windows that looked out over New Busan. You have demonstrated capabilities that we did not know were possible. Your species has succeeded where our most advanced civilizations failed. More importantly, you have done so while maintaining cooperation rather than conquest as your primary approach. Outside the diplomatic center, the evidence of that cooperation was visible everywhere. The settlement had grown into a city that seamlessly integrated human architecture, crystal hunter biotechnology, and environmental systems that worked with Kythera Prime's unique characteristics. Streets flowed in patterns that channeled stormwater into power generation systems. Buildings incorporated living crystal formations that provided light, heat, and communication networks. Gardens flourished in soil that had once been considered too hostile for any form of agriculture. Dr. Kim So-young had established the galaxy's first medical research center, focused on positive environmental adaptation. Her studies of human health improvements on Kythera Prime had revolutionized understanding of species evolution and planetary symbiosis. We have documented physical and mental enhancements in every human who has lived here for more than 6 months, she explained to a group of alien medical researchers. Bone density, muscle strength, cognitive function, disease resistance, and longevity have all improved beyond Earth normal ranges. But the most significant change is psychological. Humans living in partnership with this environment show enhanced creativity, problem-solving ability, and emotional stability. The alien researchers struggled to understand how environmental stress could produce positive adaptations rather than negative ones. Their species had evolved on worlds that were naturally suitable for their biology. The concept of a species becoming stronger through exposure to hostile conditions challenged their fundamental understanding of evolutionary biology. Yuna had become the galaxy's leading expert on interspecies environmental cooperation. Her research partnership with the Crystal Hunters had produced breakthrough discoveries about planetary ecosystem management that were being applied to struggling colonies throughout known space. The Crystal Hunters have been gardening Kythera Prime for over 3,000 years, she explained to the assembled alien scientists. They understand planetary chemistry and geological processes in ways that our technology is only beginning to measure. By working with them instead of trying to replace them, we have learned to manage environmental systems that seemed chaotic and destructive. Her research had produced practical applications that were already helping struggling colonies on dozens of worlds. Techniques developed through human crystal hunter cooperation were being used to stabilize atmospheric conditions, improve soil chemistry, and establish sustainable relationships between colonists and native ecosystems. Park Do-hyun had become the galaxy's most sought-after expert on adaptive architecture. His building techniques, developed through necessity on Kythera Prime, were being studied and copied by civilizations that had been constructing buildings for millennia longer than humans had been using tools. Traditional galactic architecture fights against planetary conditions, he explained to a delegation of engineers from the Thuran Empire. Our approach works with those conditions to create structures that become stronger and more efficient over time. Instead of wearing down, our buildings improve as they interact with their environment. The Thuran engineers, members of a species known throughout the galaxy for their construction expertise, examined Do-hyun's designs with a mixture of admiration and confusion. Their methods focused on creating structures that could resist any environmental challenge through advanced materials and energy barriers. The human approach seemed primitive by comparison, yet it achieved better results with fewer resources. Cho Min-soo's agricultural innovations had produced food security solutions that were being implemented on agricultural worlds throughout the sector. His crops, adapted to thrive in extreme conditions, were providing enhanced nutrition while requiring fewer resources than traditional galactic farming methods. The key is diversity and adaptation, he told a conference of agricultural specialists from 12 different species. Instead of trying to create identical growing conditions on every world, we adapt our crops to work with local environmental characteristics. The plants become stronger and more productive. The soil becomes healthier. The entire system becomes more resilient. The most remarkable development had been the emergence of O-Jaemin as humanity's first ambassador to the Galactic Council. At 23 years old, he had been born on a failing mining colony and had spent his teenage years helping to establish New Busan. His presentation to the assembled alien governments had changed galactic understanding of human capabilities. We do not see hostile environments, Jaemin had told the council during his historic address. We see opportunities for adaptation and growth. What you consider impossible challenges, we consider interesting problems. What you call Deathworlds, we call home. His words had been broadcast throughout galactic civilization, reaching billions of beings who had never encountered a species that actively sought out environmental challenges rather than avoiding them. The transformation of galactic perspectives was evident in the steady stream of visitors to New Busan. Scientists came to study human adaptation techniques. Engineers came to learn about symbiotic architecture. Diplomats came to understand cooperation-based colonization methods. Most remarkably, other species had begun requesting human assistance with their own struggling colonies. We have received formal requests for colonization assistance from 18 different civilizations, reported Zhang Hieji during a settlement council meeting. They want human advisors to help establish sustainable settlements on worlds that their species cannot colonize using traditional methods. The irony was not lost on anyone in the room. Humans, considered a primitive species from a death world, were being asked to help advanced civilizations solve their colonization problems. Young Nam Suho, now 10 years old and completely bilingual in human and crystal hunter languages, had become the settlement's primary cultural liaison. His ability to facilitate communication between species had helped establish the first interspecies cooperative agreements in galactic history. The crystal hunters want to know if other planets have guardian species like them, he reported after a lengthy harmonic conversation with the local Crystal Hunter Council. They think many colonization failures happen because people do not talk to the beings who already live on the worlds they are trying to settle. This insight had prompted the Galactic Council to establish new protocols for planetary colonization that required communication. Attempts with native species before any settlement efforts began The policy change inspired by human success on Cathera Prime was already preventing conflicts and improving colonization success rates throughout known space. As the formal ceremony began for humanity's acceptance into the Galactic Council, G1 reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. They had started as refugees fleeing a failed colony, desperate and nearly hopeless. They had crashed on a world that was considered unsurvivable. By every advanced civilization in the galaxy now, they were being recognized as equals and teachers by species that had mastered interstellar travel before humans had learned to make fire. Governor G1, said Ambassador Velthar as the ceremony reached its conclusion, the Galactic Council has one final question. How did your species accomplish what our civilizations could not? G1 looked out through the ceremonial hall's windows at the city they had built in partnership with Cathera Prime. Human children played in gardens that bloomed with alien flowers. Crystal hunters moved through the streets as welcome neighbors and partners. Architecture that had seemed impossible a year ago now housed hundreds of families in comfort and safety. We listened, he said simply. We listened to the planet. We listened to the beings who lived here before us. We listened to what the NV